Good morning, everyone. In the interests of time, I want to go ahead and get us started, do some positive behavioral reinforcement for timeliness. My name is Brian King. I'm the Vice Chair for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry here, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all this morning to another in our series of distinguished visiting lecturers. I want to welcome the people who are watching remotely from Oakland and from Mission Bay and from the back row of this auditorium. We are delighted today to welcome Dr. Paramjit Joshi, who is a professor of clinical psychiatry at the University of California, Irvine. Dr. Joshi has made extraordinary and sustained contributions to child and adolescent psychiatry. She started her career as a pediatrician in India and then came to the United States to do her psychiatric training at Johns Hopkins University, where she remained on the faculty for some 2 decades, and then went across town to become chair of the Department of Psychiatry at Children's National Medical Center. She's been recognized with numerous awards for her lifetime contributions to child and adolescent psychiatry, and has made significant contributions not only to our understanding of childhood psychopathology, but also to our field through her service as a leader in national organizations. She is a past president of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and just parenthetically today joins 3 other past presidents of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. We have a convocation of presidents here with 4 of them. Bob Hendren, Tom Anders, Larry Greenhill are all here. And president of the American Association of Directors of Psychiatric, of Child Psychiatry, professors of child and adolescent psychiatry. So a number of contributions, both through her research into the field. Her area of clinical and research focus has been in depression, bipolar disorder, global health, and trauma. And she's going to use both serendipity and vicissitudes in the same sentence today. So it's a pleasure to welcome you here, Paramjit. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian. Good morning, everyone, and it indeed is such a pleasure to be here, especially amongst friends and colleagues who I have really come to know over the years and who I value very much. And Brian and I go back some years. I was teasing him last night at dinner. I said, Lisa, I color my hair. And Brian was talking about a woman who appeared to be younger than you and offered her seat to you, or was older than you and offered her seat in the bus or something like that. And when Matt State invited me to these grand rounds, I said, what's it that you want to talk about? He said, anything. I said, should it be a scientific talk? He said, not necessarily, so I figured I'll just talk about life. And so here we go. I do not have any conflicts to declare. And I came across a really interesting article, and I thought I'll start out with this. It's titled Maximizing with Satisficing, and yes, spelt differently. Happiness is a matter of choice. And the co-authors the lead author was Barry Schwartz. And in that article, he talked about the work of Herbert Simon from 1955, who was an economist. And as I read through this article, I felt perhaps what Herbert Simon said back in 1955 as economist perhaps could apply to life in general, is when do we maximize and when are we just satisfied with things that happen in our lives? So more than half a century ago, Simon suggested an approach to explaining choices that we make, more cognizant of human cognitive limitations than rational choice theory. And so while oftentimes we think we are making a very rational choice, perhaps it's not the case. He also argued that the presumed goal of maximization or optimization is virtually always unrealizable in real life, owing both to the complexity of the human environment and the limitations of human information processing. Many of us, we are from various areas. Some of you are young child and adolescent psychiatrists, young in your profession, some are mid-career, Some are like me, much later in our careers. But we walk through many, many doors in our lives, both professionally and personally. And the idea that people go through life with all their options laid before them as if on a buffet table is a mere fallacy and so farther from the truth. The reality is that life is a way of throwing really curved balls at us. Some we are very good at catching and running and making home runs. There are others who hit us hard. And so the questions on the table are, what do we do with the ones that we catch, and how can we sort of maximize with a catched ball? But more importantly, what do we do when a ball really hits us hard, and how do we sort of overcome that and recover from that? And we walk through many doors in life, and some actually lead us nowhere. And an example in one where it was really perilous, we were on vacation in the Netherlands someplace, and I thought it was a door, but actually it was a glass door, and I remember walking through it, realized it was really not a door that was going to open. And I remember breaking my spectacles. So that was a perilous situation as far as I'm concerned. But then there are others that are really give you enticing opportunities. And what do you do with that? So just a little bit about my early life. I was born and raised in post-colonial India to parents who were the first in both their families to go to college. And the influences at the time, my mother's family had just endured the partition and migrating from Pakistan to India, which really mattered a lot to my personal life as I got older, hearing stories about that. And this was not by choice but circumstance. Simon suggested that in no choice situations, people actually have the goal of maximizing rather than just satisficing. And then the British influence was still very strong as I was growing up, and so some of the factors that my parents, the choices that they made for me and my two siblings, we were sent to British schools where most of the instruction was in English, and this then exposed us to the Western music and Western movies. So we grew up with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Bee Gees and the Eagles, and so a lot of this was really the influences that we had growing up, because this is what we were exposed to at that time. Simon would say a satisficer simply encounters and evaluates goods until one is encountered that exceeds the acceptability threshold, and then that good is chosen. I believe these paradigms applied to my parents in some of the decisions they made about themselves and their 3 children. Secondary education, I was given 3 choices. I was not able to think for myself at the time. I was 16, and I was told that I could either be a lawyer, or I could be an engineer, or I could be a doctor. Now there's a joke about this currently, where for an Indian parent, when the child turns 1, they put, in some cultures they'll put a calculator or a book or a stethoscope in front of the child, and depends what the child picks. In the Indian culture, you just have different colors of stethoscopes. So, in terms of a lawyer, I was somewhat shy and introverted growing up. I did not have a role model to emulate. There were no lawyers in my family. I was horrible at physics and mathematics, so engineering was out of the question. I was reasonably good at botany and zoology. And my mother had actually applied to the same med school I eventually graduated from, but was unable to join because of the partition, and everything was just in flux. And I knew that my mother had always aspired to be a physician. And back in the day, if she had become a physician, I guess that she would have never gotten married, because professional women in that era tended not to get married, and then I would not be here. So I always would say to her, well, there's a silver lining to this. And so that was that. Now medical school, I joined medical school as a teenager with no idea what I got myself into. I was just following instructions. But that seriously is the story of my life. And I became very good at being a conformist growing up, and I think hindsight, it has served me well. And so I joined the Christian Medical College in Ludhiana, which was started out by Dr. Edith Brown back in 1897. And she was a missionary from England who came to India. And what she found, especially in the Punjab, which is north of India, were that there were women who, she was OB, obstetrics and gynecologist, and found that women were really not getting good prenatal care, and there were the infant mortality rate was really high, but the women would not go to male doctors. And so she decided on her own that she should train women in medicine so that the women in the Punjab would be able to get good OB care. And so the college that she started was the it was originally the Women's Christian Medical College and the Brown Memorial Hospital, named after Edith Brown, a remarkable person. I was sort of an above average student. I was not the worst in my class. I was not the best in my class. I kind of was in the middle somewhere. And I found many classes, especially the preclinical years, rather boring. It really didn't inspire me till I started with my pediatric clerkship. And this is me in my when I graduated. Now in 1956, it was a women's college, and then men decided, I don't know how the decision was made, but men became part of the medical school class, and we were literally 25 boys and 25 girls. And that is the way it went on for decades. And more recently, I know the class size has changed. And when I was doing my pediatrics, something excited me, and I got invigorated. And I thought, this is my calling. This is what I really want to do when I grow up. And it was total serendipity that a professor of pediatrics at the time retired as I was just starting my internship. And there was this missionary pediatrician, Jean Griffith, from the University of Wisconsin, who came. We used to have a lot of missionary physicians at our medical school. And she became the new chief of pediatrics. This woman literally changed my life. She was inspiring. She was a hard taskmaster. She was selfless, brilliant, very tough but fair, had an iron fist disguised by a velvet glove. And the anecdote that I will always remember, we used to walk around bed rounds, and she would ask us to do spot diagnosis on the patients. And so we were standing at the bedside of this patient, and she said, what do you think is wrong with the patient? And we were able to examine the patient for less than half a minute. She would time it. I knew the patient had an enlarged liver, but really, anyway, I fell short. And I forget what I said, and she said, your answer was wrong. She literally humiliated me in front of all my colleagues. And she said, did you look at the sclera? I had not. And the patient was jaundiced. If I'd just done that, I would have known the patient was jaundiced. Anyway, I remember calling my parents. At that time, you had to actually book a call, long distance, and say, I was crying, and my father was worse than Dr. Griffith. So that was the end of that story. It's like pull up your socks and keep moving. And so pediatric residency, we did a year of rotating internship, 3 years of pediatric residency, and my early mentors were Dr. Griffith and Dr. Paramjit Gill, who then took on as the chief of peds eventually. And the lessons I learned from both of them really were how to plan and multitask, which came in handy as the years went by. To think independently. I did not grow up thinking independently. I was told what to do. I was told what profession to go into. I did not make these choices. There are others who made choices for me. And not to be afraid to ask questions. And I also learned from both of them to take one day at a time, going with the flow and rolling with unforeseen punches, and never complaining. That was quickly stopped by my father. And then I got married, and while I had zero interest in coming to the United States, I was mighty happy where I was. I wanted to join the Indian Armed Forces because that's what my father was, and join the Indian Army as a physician. But my husband was very enticed by pursuing a fellowship in hematology oncology, and we had another missionary physician from the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center, Bill Robinson, who was a hematologist oncologist. And so we landed in Denver in 1976, where my second son was born. At that time, I made a decision, and it was a choice, to be a stay-at-home mom for about 2.5 years. But I have to tell you, I was bored just staying at home, and it was just my own personal thing. I was taking care of the 2 boys, but I just felt I was not being stimulated. I thought I was forgetting what I had learned in medical school, and I really wanted to get back into practicing medicine. So I started volunteering and shadowing at the Children's Hospital in Denver. Now, of course, it is relocated. At that time, it was right in the city of Denver. And the pediatrics in the U.S. was very different from what I was exposed to. I used to get a rush taking care of pediatric patients in India, where I was treating infections, tuberculosis, neonatal tetanus, meningitis, rheumatic heart fever. And at that time, I felt it was a lot of well baby checks. And it was just not exciting for me. And I thought, gosh, there's got to be more to children than just checking their height, weight, and head circumference. And so I was really at a crossroads about what to do next. And so at the same time, I had 2 kids now and a husband. And so what do we do? So work and family are often juxtaposed, as both men and women have come to realize. But I learned to embrace them both and overcome my fear of leaving my children with my parents in India for 1 year when I decided to start a residency in general psychiatry. A very good friend of mine, Nina Shore, who serves on the ABPN board as a neurologist and is the deputy director of the National Institutes of Neurological Disorders and Stroke in Bethesda, has expressed in her own writings that family and work are the 2 sides of the very same extraordinarily beautiful coin. Embrace their energy and the world will be richer for it. And legacy is everything. Honor what is good in the past, fuel what is promising in the future, and you will bring meaning and substance to the present. Work-life balance, actually I never heard of it till my oldest son, who's a surgeon and a training director longer than I've been one, said to me a few years ago, Mom, we have to balance work and life. I said, what is that? And I finally realized that it's combining personal and professional life effectively, which is a critical part of remaining satisfied, fulfilled, and a whole person at the end of each day. And the principle that has guided the choices I have made is that prioritization is critical, and you cannot second guess your own priorities even if they change over time. And as reflecting on my career, there are times I prioritize my profession, there are other times I prioritize my family, and sometimes it's both at the same time. But these are choices, you face almost on a continuous basis. And as I reflect back, I think I've done all of that. And deciding what mattered most to me in a particular situation, what needed to be attended to now, and what could wait until later was empowering and energizing for me, even in the face of overwhelming guilt. And the boys, every time when they're trying to give me a hard time, it's, what do you expect? You abandoned us, for the 1 year that they were in India. So taking risks and embracing change, some I felt I had to, and others I made a conscious choice to. So this is the salient question in decisions we have made. Is the risk of failure worth the reward of success? And when the difference you can make by the possibility of succeeding outweighs in your mind the possibility that you will fail, you're probably ready to take on a challenge of a change despite your success in your current situation. In my professional and personal life, I think there were 2 really big things that I can reflect on. One is switching from pediatrics to psychiatry and eventually child and adolescent psychiatry, and then leaving my boys in India for a year while I completed my internship in general psychiatry. Hindsight, was it worth it? You'll have to ask my boys. I'll give you their phone numbers. So growing up in India, we were so influenced by the British that I knew all about the UK system and the British system. We knew about Cambridge and Oxford and the Guy's Hospital and all of that. I don't remember really learning too much about the United States in my earlier years. And so when I was at my medical school, I met Dr. Carl Taylor, who was the founder of the academic discipline of international health. He was born to medical missionaries in India in the Himalayas, spent most of his childhood there, and then finally went to medical school at Harvard. And in 1947, during the partition between Pakistan and India, went back to India to start clinics to take care of the injured during the riots. And the reach of his life was extraordinary, working in over 70 countries. And in 1952, he founded the Department of Preventive Medicine at my medical school. He was a founding chair of the Department of International Health at Hopkins, where he was there for about 48 years. But during this body of work, he traveled to about 70 countries and really had a huge influence on public health. And he provided breakthrough understandings in the diagnosis of childhood disorders and marginalized populations, pneumonia, neonatal tetanus, malnutrition, and so on and so forth. And in 1993, President Clinton recognized him for his sustained work to protect children around the world and a lifetime commitment to primary care. The reason I've highlighted neonatal tetanus, in India, when you do your boards in pediatrics, you have to do a thesis. And I picked neonatal tetanus. And the idea was that there were all these babies being born in the villages, and the umbilical cord was being cut by a sickle, which was never sterilized or anything like that. And the goal, we collected about 200 some newborns with tetanus at the medical school and the hospital. And the idea was, could we decrease the mortality? And so we used to intubate them, and of course, give them IV fluids and so on and so forth. And we were able to show that actually if you take care of them early on, you can decrease the mortality of some of these babies. And then a whole impetus was on public health in the villages. And so that was really, I would say, thanks to Dr. Taylor. And so I knew he was at Hopkins. So while I was making a decision about weight, first of all, I did not know that you have to do general psychiatry before you do child psychiatry. So I was quite horrified to find out when I decided to do child and adolescent psychiatry, by the way, you have to do general psychiatry. And so I said, oh, okay, never mind. Okay, that's what I need to do. And so I started applying around. And so there were two institutions that came to mind easily. One was, of course, Hopkins because of Dr. Taylor. The other one was University of Wisconsin because of Dr. Griffith. The two institutions I knew in the United States. And of course, I'd been here now for about 2.5 years and had learned about other institutions. And so the responses both from Hopkins and from University of Wisconsin were very different. Hopkins invited me for an interview. University of Wisconsin was very concerned about my spoken English language and felt that because I had trained overseas, that perhaps I would not be able to communicate with patients. I kept that letter for many, many years, and I finally got rid of it. I said, I'm past that. The other person at Hopkins, of course, met Dr. Leo Kanner, and I remember very distinctly doing a grand rounds with him. Back at Hopkins, the grand rounds used to be that the resident or the fellow presents a case and a faculty member does the discussion. And so this was a case of separation anxiety, and Dr. Leo Kanner would come to grand rounds and from time to time teach us. And so that was really very, very special. And this is the old Phipps clinic. The grand rounds used to be held right here. And this was where the resident, we used to take night call. And this was a fascinating place up here because we used to have journal club on Fridays at 5 o'clock. And sherry used to be served at our journal clubs. And I never drank back then, what a shame. But those were very special years. The other person who I owe a lot of debt of gratitude is to Dr. William Brakey. Dr. Brakey came he was Irish from Ireland, came as a missionary to my medical school to start the Department of Psychiatry. I didn't know anything about psychiatry. Our exposure in my medical school was a 2-week rotation at a state hospital at which time ECT was still being delivered without anesthesia. So it was a very horrifying experience, and it's not something that appealed to me at the time. And there was a case that I presented to Dr. Brakey which had to do with a young girl who was about 16, and we couldn't figure out what was wrong with her on the pediatric floor. Her skin was completely jaundiced, another jaundiced patient. And I did remember to examine her sclera, and her sclera were not jaundiced. And I said, And Dr. Brakey said, have you talked, have you gotten the story from this patient? Like, what is her life like? Which I had not. And so I asked her about, I started talking to this patient, and she was going to be forced to get married, and she had plans to go to college. And she thought that if she rubbed turmeric all over her skin and got really ill, no boy would want to marry her. And so I mean, I will never forget this case, but Dr. Brakey helped me realize that this is sort of the psychosocial aspects of a child's care. And unbeknownst to me, when I came to interview at Hopkins, there was Dr. Brakey. He had found his way from Ireland to India to Hopkins, and he became the director of community psychiatry at Hopkins, and still is on the faculty there. He's retired, but still comes to teach and comes to grand rounds. Just a remarkable person. So you can just see how the dots have sort of connected in my lifetime with all the mentors that I've had. The other two people that really have been completely instrumental in my growth professionally are Drs. Coyle and Dr. Harris. So Dr. Coyle was named the Distinguished Service Professor of Child Psychiatry back in 1985. He was the youngest professor to be named full professor at Hopkins at the age of 35. Just a remarkable person. He was just brilliant. And then in 1991, he moved on to Harvard to chair the Consolidated Department of Psychiatry, and he still has a lab at the McLean Hospital. And of course, Dr. James Harris, who many of you know, who was my training director my fellowship training director at Hopkins. And so Dr. Coyle gave me my first job. I finished my fellowship. I was about to finish my fellowship, and he wanted to talk to me, and he said, so what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. He said, you don't? I said, actually I don't. And he said, well, would you like to stay on at Hopkins? And I said, doing what? And he said, well, would you be interested in running the inpatient unit? I said, what? Because the attending on the inpatient unit, it was someone I admired, Dr. Hahn, and how could I possibly kind of do what Dr. Hahn was doing? But anyway, so that's long story short. And Dr. Harris, he was just such a mentor. He insisted that I join the Maryland Regional Council, and he said, don't become the secretary, don't become the president, you need to become the delegate. And I said, why is that? He said, because if you're a delegate of a regional council, then you represent the state at AACAP. I did not know what it meant. I did what he told me. I joined the organization, and that was my introduction to AACAP. He also took me to my first AACAP meeting at DC and insisted that I put a poster together, which I did, on a case of conduct disorder treated with lithium. Hindsight, I'm not sure what I was doing, but I remember Magda Campbell coming up to my poster, and I was just so in awe of her saying something positive about it. I don't remember what it was, but that was what Dr. Harris did. And while I was still a very junior assistant professor, he took me to what was then the professors group, and that meeting was in Cancun. It is now the American Association of Directors of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, or AADCAP. But these were my mentors who really opened so many doors for me and made sure I kind of did what they were hoping I would do. And when Dr. David Pruitt was the president of AACAP, he appointed me to my first committee on consumer issues. And then over time, there were many committees that I became a part of. And Dr. Richard Sauls was my examiner for the CAP boards. And I remember he was the head of child psychiatry at the University of Maryland and Shepherd Pratt Hospital. And the next year after that, he had his own team and asked me to join his ABPN team as an examiner. And as of January, I'll be the chair of the ABPN. And so, the trajectory has just sort of, people open doors for me, and, I walked through them. And now Dr. Marilyn Powell, I used to be her mentor. She was a Hopkins medical student when I first met her. And she completed her pediatric residency at Hopkins and then went into psychiatry and child psychiatry. And then in 1999, she had, in the meantime, moved to Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C. And when David Mrazek moved on to become the chair of psychiatry at George Washington, Marilyn called me and said, Paramjit, I think you should look at the chair position. And I said, Marilyn, I'm really happy where I am. Hopkins is my home. And she said, don't be so arrogant, is what she told me. I remember that distinctly. I said, okay, I'll come interview. And so when I went to the Children's Hospital in D.C., I was back in pediatrics. I walked through the doors and I said, this is it. So they offered me the position. I accepted the position. I called her and she said, already? That was impulsive. So with Maryland, there's no winning. Anyway, so I went to Children's in 1999 and was there for about 18 some years. So the mentors, they all gave me a chance and they believed in me. Even when at times I did not believe in myself, and I definitely could not let them down. And what are the qualities that I most admired about all of my mentors? Well, they were brilliant and very, very kind, encouraging, opening many doors. They truly cared about their trainees. Dr. Harris would leave us gifts in our offices on Christmas Eve. And they would be very thoughtful gifts, and I still have all of them over the years. They brought out the best in us. They've held my hand as I navigated academic life, always had my best interest at heart, and over time have become trusted colleagues who I continue to lean on. I remember calling Dr. Coyle when I was making a decision to move from Hopkins to Children's, and he said, Paramjit, there is a time and a place in life where it's time to move on, and this is the time for you to move on. And that was it. I followed instructions, and there it was. But the other thing that I've come to realize is that they all had grit. So let's talk a little bit about some of the myths about mentors and mentees. One is that the mentor-mentee relationship is unidirectional. As you can tell with my experiences with Dr. Pao, it went both ways. She, for the most part, has now become my mentor. On those with whom you have a formal declared relationship are your mentors. It doesn't have to be. They can be very informal. It doesn't have to be sitting down and saying, you're going to be my mentor. Mentors are the kind of people who always walk on water. Mine always have, but what I've learned from others that sometimes that's not the case. And that you should have only one and only one mentor at a time. You really have many. And your mentors are forever. Choose them wisely, because once you do, you're stuck with one another for your whole professional life. And you will always be the student and they will always be the mentors. So the tapestry of our lives and the threads that bind it. I've often been asked the question, how do you get to be where you are, and how do you do it all without being pulled in so many directions? And the honest answer is really, I don't know. It's a collection of factors, I think. And I've just listed some of them. Of course, family support, luck and serendipity, being at the right place at the right time. I hear a lot of people say that. Marvelous mentors, taking risks and embracing change, owning errors in your own judgment, which I have a list of, not taking yourself too seriously and being able to laugh at yourself. And in the last 2 decades, I find myself saying to myself and to people around me, when something negative happens or it's really causing a lot of angst, this too shall pass. Nothing is permanent. Give a little, get a little, being flexible and reasonable, and of course good health. So I want to spend a little time talking about grit. And some of you may have read this by Angela Duckworth, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. So grit, according to Duckworth, is a reliable predictor of success in multiple domains. We talk about resilience, but this is talking more about grit, which kind of helps one become a little more resilient as well. And according to Duckworth, no other commonly measured personality factor is as effective in predicting success, whether graduating high school, completing West Point, or being successful as a teacher or salesperson. Regardless of specific attributes and advantages that help someone succeed in diverse domains of challenge, grit matters in all of them. High achievers have extraordinary stamina. Even if they are already at the top of their game, they're always striving to improve. Even if their work requires sacrifice, they remain in love with what they do. Even when easier paths beckon, their commitment is steadfast, and this remarkable combination of strength is grit. It sure comes in handy. And after these grand rounds, you can all go and Google the grit scale. There is a grit scale. And so her successful formula is that talent times effort is skill, and skill times effort is achievement. So you can have all the talent, but if you don't put effort, you don't get very far. And you can have all the skill, but if you don't put effort, you can't achieve. So the dimensions of grit, G is for growth, is about how likely we are to go seek fresh ideas, perspectives, inputs, and ideas to help you succeed at that thing. Resilience is about bouncing back from adversity and being able to use adversity. Instinct is about going about after our goals the best way, not the hardest way. And tenacity is that perseverance, persistence, never say die, never say quit dimension of grit. And so the title originally was The Aspects of Grit, but the more I read about it, it's almost the epigenetic aspects of grit, because grit, talent, and all other psychological traits relevant to success in life are influenced both by genes and also by your circumstances, experiences, and so forth. And grit usually does increase with age for the most part, and those with grit tend to have 4 psychological assets that develop over time in a particular order. The first one is interest, because if you're not interested in something, the rest is not going to happen. So intrinsic enjoyment in what one does. And I find myself saying, we've just finished our applicant interviews for the Child Fellowship Program, and I tell the applicants, you really need to love what you do, because if you don't, it's not worth it. I wake up every morning, I love what I do, and so even though I should have retired some time ago, I can't, because it's just, what will I do with myself? It's almost, it's like a hobby. It just feels good. It's nice to go to work and work with students and residents and teach and see patients. It's a lot of fun, and I'm not running a department, which is even better. So that's great. Practice, daily discipline of trying to improve in a deliberate practice manner. Purpose, a conviction that one's work matters. And then of course hope when you're facing obstacles and doubts. Now you can have all the grit you want, but if you don't have opportunities, you can't pull it together. So grit is something that you can grow from within, cultivate interests, daily challenging skills, connecting to a larger purpose, and hoping when all seems lost. And from the outside in is all the mentors and the teachers and the coaches and our friends and family who sort of help us with that. And according to Duckworth, grit leads to a healthy emotional life and satisfaction that comes from doing something important, doing it well, and doing it even though it's very hard, it is satisfying. And so to be gritty is to keep putting one foot in front of the other, to hold fast to an interesting and purposeful goal, to invest day after week after year in challenging practice, and to fall down 7 times and rise 8. And this is the scale I was telling you about. You can take the questions and you can assess for yourselves how gritty each one of us are. The next thing that we face in academic life is the challenges of versatility versus focus. So in academic settings, they often facilitate achievement of broad involvement and capability and draws those who value this to it. And being broadly involved and capable is a wonderful thing. But are you spreading yourself too thin by being broad? And being a generalist can be taken as being insufficiently focused to develop a specific area of expertise. I think all of us have faced that in our professional lives. Do we want to just do general child and adolescent psychiatry, or is the area of focus that we really want to focus on? And it's a bit of a dilemma. Conversely, to be perceived of as an expert in a particular area and to have mastered that area to the point of national recognition as a go-to person for it requires attention and concentration. But that carefully aimed attention can earn you the label as too narrow. One critical trick in academic medicine is finding the right balance between casting the net broadly and becoming a singular expert in a subdiscipline. And this is one of the hardest things to learn, but it makes the difference between the dilettantes and the true masters of the disciplines, as Nina Shore would say. Other academic challenges. So how do you forge a career that on one hand has breadth and demonstrates your versatility in a world of constantly competing interests and imperatives, and on the other solidifies your reputation for depth and unique expertise in a singular programmatic area? And so how do you do it all without being pulled in a dozen different directions? And how do you maintain who you are while serving the needs of your trainees, your colleagues, institutions, family, and community? And the short answer is, it isn't easy, and there's no one roadmap to get you there. It is really individualistic. And Nina will say the longer and more accurate answer is that the journey you will take trying to find the right balance for you is ultimately so enriching and fulfilling that the final destination will seem pale by comparison. So it is the journey which is much more important than the destination. And so when should you take on a leadership position? So just to give you an example, my older son, who is a surgeon, was getting a little itchy to get his promotion from assistant to associate. He asked me about it. I looked at his CV and I said, "You're not ready." And he said, what? I said, you just aren't. You need a little more experience. He was 5.5 or 6 years into his assistant professorship. He was a little disappointed, but I gave him an honest answer. I said, you're a little behind on your publications. You have a few in the pipeline. I think you have a much stronger case to go up for promotion, to associate. He eventually listened to his mother, and all was well. And then more recently, his chair retired. And he said, Mom, should I throw my hat in the ring? I said, absolutely not. and I'll tell you the reasons why. So the decision of whether and when to take on a leadership position is very individualistic, of course. But there's one aspect which is important to keep in mind at early stages of our professional development. It is possible and problematic to be sufficiently flattered and magnanimous to take such a position on too early in your career. Leading an academic group means that everyone else's problems become yours. It also means that your success is measured and generated in fueling, facilitating, and empowering the success of others. And I think all the senior leadership in this audience would probably agree with me. So it is critical that you forge your own career and attain sufficient success in your own pursuits so that eventually your personal goal is the attainment by others of their goals. And so once you're a leader, it is no longer about you. It is about those in your charge, and you must be ready to be backstage enabling and in the audience applauding, but not on stage most of the time. And I think that is really, really important. And going back to my older son, I don't think he's there yet. Time will come, but not quite. And I think that is really, really important for all of us. At least that is what I saw in my own mentors. So a time comes when you don't need to be the first author on every article. The time comes when you want your junior faculty to take that lead, or to write grants, or whatever it might be. And then, of course, happily taking one for the team. While it should not always be your turn will come to be the team player and to ensure that your division and department look like team players to the institutional leadership. I think it's really important. And although some of these obligations will be right up your career alley and others will create opportunities for career benefit, some you will just want to do because it is the right thing to do. Don't fight it. Just make certain that when you do these magnanimous contributions, your chair knows about it, your division chief knows about it, so it'll put it on your CV. It might help with your promotion and your kind of recognition in the institution. But the world would be a very sad place indeed if it were a bad thing to periodically contribute selflessly to the greater good. So what about promotions? So assistant professors must demonstrate focus. Associate professors must demonstrate breadth. Full professors must demonstrate breadth and teach others how to demonstrate focus. And vice chairs must teach others to demonstrate breadth within their areas of focus. And chairs must teach others with a broad array of areas of focus to teach others to focus on demonstrating breadth. Now the dean must be a person to whom this all makes sense and seems important. So barriers to pursuit and achievement. In recent years, the roles of leaders in medicine has pointed to the increasing emphasis on revenue generation. We all talk about RVUs, patient satisfaction, the surveys, the Gainey surveys, care quality and outcome measures, and the decreasing availability of resources in every arena are factors that have changed the roles of physician leaders and the desirability of such positions to those most qualified to take it. So we'll encounter really wonderful fellows who we think should really be in academic medicine, but there are some of these factors that turn them away from it, which is a real shame. And there are four cardinal virtues that should guide physician leadership, as by Chovanec. She's written a lovely paper on that. Self-effacement, self-sacrifice, compassion, and integrity. And so this is not easy in today's world of shrinking means and growing demands that diverts your attention from the big picture vision on which a leader's energy should focus. When I was a department chair, I often felt like most of my job involved serving as a translator of two people, both of whom spoke perfectly good English. No matter what your field or venue, people are people, and leadership therefore involves a great deal of conflict, mediation, and resolution. Most would say that the approach you take to a particular conflict depends on the issues at hand, the people involved, and the culture of the institution of which it and they are a part of. So this is undoubtedly true, but there are studies in several different fields that suggest, not surprisingly, that the leadership and management styles of the mediator also plays a role. So the guiding principles of leadership: listen well and read between the lines, more importantly, learn from everyone and everything, value all components and contributions, thought without action is useless, but action without thought is even worse, development is forever, and if you look at the mirror and can't laugh at the person who looks back at you, the ball game is over. So Nina says, laugh a lot. And so in conclusion, what we eventually accomplish may depend more on our passion and perseverance than on our innate talent. And these are my 5 grandchildren. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions or words of wisdom from the wise. I would be curious to at least hear from some of the younger people some of the things that you struggle with and try and make sense of, and or as you look to your futures, what you hope to aspire and what comes in the way or what works for you all. Yes?
Maybe I can ask a question on behalf of the
Sure.
younger folks in the audience. So you brought up an excellent point, and I really liked your talk.
Thank you.
I've been to many grand rounds, and this is the first one, I think, in which someone's actually laid out sort of life and work and balance, and sort of a lot of the sort of major questions that we all face in life, from very beginning all the way to the end. The question I had that you brought up on your presentation is that there are several fellows that I supervise that I think would be wonderful on our faculty. I'd like to attract them and bring them on board. The issue we face, and I think this is faced by many academic institutions, is that the salary that we're able to offer in the academic institute versus what the outside is offering is a huge difference.
Right.
And what you brought up with the reality of having to increase WRVUs and revenues and bring in more income to keep the department afloat, it does scare away our trainees and fellows from taking a position. I was wondering if you had any thoughts or suggestions on how we could bring on board our young talent and encourage them and in such a way that they won't be afraid of.
So my standpoint on that is that yes, economics and money and salary is important, but it's not the only thing in our professional lives. I think there's a lot of talk about burnout and wellness and such things. Personally for me, it has been really so fulfilling for me with the larger child and adolescent psychiatry world in both in the US and abroad. Working with colleagues, you're not a solo practitioner. I get a lot of meaning out of being on a committee or teaching or expanding my role rather than just seeing patients and getting a salary. At least for me personally, that has been most fulfilling. And I remember when I completed my fellowship, there were my colleagues who were going out in practice and making like 4 times more. For me personally, that was less important. But I can understand where the huge debt that medical students are coming out with, and so they may want to do that. But my advice to them would be, even if you do go into the private sector and definitely have a higher salary, get involved. You can be a volunteer faculty member. You can come back and teach. You can. I think their life will be much more fulfilling than not. And then, of course, there are others, that's exactly what they want to do, but then it's our responsibility in leadership roles to sort of foster that. And you don't want them to just just focus on the RVUs. Get them involved. If you have a great structure here where you have the research enterprise here at UCSF is remarkable, and the envy of everyone around, even if you're on the coattails of a senior person. It is so gratifying because it really keeps you growing and intellectually sort of alive. Hi.
Thank you for an excellent talk. I just want to take issue with one of the points because we have a lot of younger people in the audience. where you spoke about leadership positions, not taking them too early. I mean, overall, I think that's good advice. On the other hand, leadership positions don't always present themselves. And so, for example, you gave an example of someone wondering whether they should apply for a chair. If they don't apply for it, it'll be 8 to 10 years before that person steps down. And I would say that when, and this kind of is consistent with the rest of your talk, that when opportunity presents itself, it's often easy to say, well, I'm not really qualified. Well, that's not your decision.
No,
That's
right.
the decision.
This was my son, so I was able to be more forceful.
One additional thing I would say is the way that people go wrong, I wouldn't say it's accepting leadership positions too early. I would say it's giving up their area of research or their expertise or their clinical work. So people move into administrative things and then they don't see patients anymore.
Right, right.
And then the administrative position eventually ends. And so you want to keep up your clinical practice, you want to keep up your...
I think you raise a good point, which is that look up, I mean, when you do want to do that, then also at the same time see what you're going to be giving up or taking on a job which you may not really relish, like making sure your budget is in the black at all times and the dean doesn't get upset with you. Tom?
You made an interesting distinction between leadership and managing a family of people you work with and mentorship. And I wonder whether you could elaborate a little bit on, you've become a marvelous mentor. So you've moved from mentee to mentor and leader, but there's a difference between the two.
There is. I think it's, we go back and forth even at this stage in my career. I mean, there are times when I don't know, should I be doing this or should I not? And it's kind of a balancing act. And for me personally, I have a tendency to say yes before I realize what I've said yes to. Every now and then it's come to bite me, but for the most part it's worked for me, or I make it work. And in terms of the mentee-mentor, I think it's flexible. I had, like my junior faculty, and even now, they will call me, even though I'm no longer, at the previous institutions, and say, what do you think I should do? And I would say, you have 2 young kids. I think this is, from my point of view, probably the right thing to stick it out, or whatever it may be, or the culture has changed. Here's an opportunity you cannot pass up. But, just go into it with your eyes open. And so every situation is slightly different, but I think, I can give you an example of Lisa Cullens, who is just a wonderful person, and she's debating between staying on at Children's in the role she was in and this opportunity that came up at the NIMH. And I said, Lisa, you have to go for it. And so, I mean, that is speaking to Dr. Bender's point earlier. Even though, it's not quite there, and she's just flourishing. Yes?
I like your distinction between maximizing and satisficing. And I akin it a little bit to, and I wanted you to, if you could expand a little bit more on that, just like, sometimes, perfection is the enemy of the good.
Yes.
Sometimes it's fine just to make a decision based on, like, is it good enough at the moment? And see some threshold. But I don't know if you had come down on a particular slide either.
I can't give you an exact example, but you find yourself like this is a one-time opportunity. You really want to maximize it, and I can't, for the top of my head, think about it at the moment. But there's some things, this is good enough. I'm fine with this. I wish I could be a little more tangible, but you will know it when you see it.
So maybe you're saying in some situations you really want to maximize, but in some situations...
Yeah, you're just happy with, that's fine. It's like, you have an office. At least you have an office. It doesn't have a window, but you have an office. I'm satisfied. Yes?
You were, in your talk, showed where there were psychic dollars, continuing my colleague's question, and times are changing. So even though you didn't have Sherry in the journal club, you enjoyed the journal club.
Exactly. That is satisfying. I did not maximize it because I didn't drink back then.
And I think we're in a time where the psychic dollars are not adequately supplementing the actual dollars as in the salaries for the practice.
Right, right.
And any wisdom on how we can increase our psychic dollars?
I'll turn to Dr. King here. Every institution is different. The psychic dollars, it's again, what gives you, when you become part of say a committee and you're being productive, I think that in itself, for me, let's just take consumer issues. We are producing facts for families. They're out there and you feel you're part of that. There are no dollars attached to it, but you feel good about something that you have produced or done, which doesn't necessarily have a monetary value to it. Or you're doing some advocacy work and you go up onto the hill and you're changing some policy for the government. There are no dollars attached to it for you, but the effort in itself, because you're giving back to the field in some ways or changing how we think children's mental health should be in this country. So those are psychic dollars, I would say. Or changing the changing the curriculum to make it better. Or there's so many ways you can get involved at a local, regional level, at a national level, at the department level, division level. There's so many levels but just just expand your horizons and you'll be so pleasantly surprised how fulfilling and satisfying it might be. Because I think innately human beings want to give. We are social beings and we want to sort of be part of the larger good, so to speak. At least most of us do. So,
listening to your presentation makes one reflect on one's own life journey. And Irving Phillips was our second chief of child psychiatry here. And I remember one day he was telling me, when the door of opportunity knocks, be prepared to go through. And I said, Irving, how am I going to hear the knock? And he said, if you are prepared, you will hear the knock.
right.
And that has been what I...
Yeah, no, that's a nice saying. Yeah. Thank you again.